The successful rescue of the Andromeda Research Facility sent shockwaves through the Galactic Assembly Station. For the first time since humanity's arrival, aliens were talking about the humans for reasons other than their primitive technology or unremarkable appearance. Something had happened that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about this young species from Earth. Dr. Kira Wells found herself at the center of attention in ways she had never expected. As the mission's psychologist, she had monitored the human crew's behavior during the rescue operation. Her data showed something remarkable that the galaxy's greatest minds had completely missed during their initial evaluation of humanity. The Science Council, composed of the most brilliant researchers from hundreds of civilizations, invited Dr. Wells to present her findings. The invitation was unprecedented for a member of such a young species. Typically, civilizations had to prove themselves over centuries before their scientists were taken seriously by the galactic community. Standing before beings whose intelligence spanned millions of years, Dr. Wells felt the weight of representing not just her research but her entire species. The presentation chamber was filled with creatures of pure energy, mechanical minds that processed information faster than any biological brain, and ancient entities whose thoughts moved on timescales humans could barely comprehend. Dr. Wells began with a simple observation that had escaped the notice of every other evaluation team. Most species in the galaxy had evolved to excel within specific environmental parameters. They developed specialized abilities that made them supremely capable within their particular niche, but limited when conditions changed. Humans were different. Earth had subjected humanity to constantly changing conditions throughout their evolution. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, and natural disasters had forced humans to adapt or die. Instead of developing specialized abilities, they had evolved something far more rare: the capacity to function effectively regardless of circumstances. The rescue mission data supported this theory perfectly. When their navigation systems failed, humans had navigated by intuition and pattern recognition. When their shielding proved inadequate, they had improvised solutions using materials never intended for that purpose. When faced with impossible odds, they had found ways to make the impossible merely difficult. Commander Veltar attended the presentation and found himself struggling to understand what he was hearing. The Altarian approach to problem-solving involved calculating optimal solutions and following predetermined procedures. The idea of succeeding through improvisation and instinct was completely foreign to his thinking. After the presentation, Veltar requested a private meeting with Jake Morrison. The Altarian officer admitted that he had seriously misjudged humanity during their first encounters. His species valued efficiency and predictability above all else, traits that made them excellent at tasks with clear parameters and known solutions. "We analyze probabilities and select the best course of action," Veltar explained to Morrison. "Your species seems to thrive in situations where the best course of action does not exist or cannot be determined in advance." The conversation revealed a fundamental difference, an approach that explained much about the galaxy's initial reaction to humanity. Most civilizations had achieved their advanced status by perfecting specific capabilities and eliminating uncertainty from their operations. Humans had achieved their progress by learning to work with uncertainty rather than against it. Word of humanity's unique psychological profile spread throughout the station faster than official communications. Species that had previously ignored the human delegation began requesting meetings and cultural exchanges. The novelty of encountering beings who could function effectively without predetermined solutions fascinated civilizations that had not faced genuine uncertainty in millennia. The ethereal conclave, despite their advanced age and accumulated wisdom, found themselves intrigued by humanity's approach to existence. Elder Zephyros personally visited the human quarters, something that had never happened before in the recorded history of the assembly station. His energy-based form flickered with curiosity as he engaged Lisa Carter in philosophical discussions. "In our 10 million years of existence," Elder Zephyros admitted during one of their conversations, "we have achieved perfect stability and accumulated vast wisdom. But perhaps in gaining certainty, we have lost something that your species still possesses." The admission from such an ancient and respected being marked a turning point in how the galaxy viewed humanity. If the ethereal conclave could acknowledge that humans possessed something valuable, then other species began to reconsider their own. Assumptions about what constituted advanced civilization. Dr. Alan Brooks established research partnerships with scientists from 17 different civilizations. His work on human neuroplasticity revealed that human brains continued forming new neural pathways throughout their entire lifespans. This biological flexibility was extremely rare in the galaxy, where most species reached mental maturity and remained relatively static thereafter. The discovery explained much about human adaptability. While other species thought in fixed patterns established early in their development, humans could literally rewire their own brains to handle new situations. This neuroplasticity allowed them to learn alien technologies, understand foreign cultures, and develop solutions that other species could not conceive. The implications were staggering for galactic civilization. Most species had achieved their advanced status through accumulated knowledge and refined techniques passed down over generations. Humans achieved their adaptability through their capacity to think differently when circumstances required it. Research teams from across the galaxy began studying human behavior and psychology. The Nexus Empire's mechanical minds found human intuition particularly fascinating because it produced accurate results through processes that could not be replicated by logical analysis. The Crystalline Collective studied human creativity, trying to understand how biological beings could generate truly original ideas. As humanity's reputation grew, so did their responsibilities within the galactic community. The Assembly began consulting human representatives on problems that had puzzled other civilizations for centuries. Their fresh perspectives and unconventional approaches yielded breakthrough solutions to challenges ranging from resource distribution to interspecies communication. Lisa Carter found herself appointed to the Advisory Council on Interspecies Relations, a position typically reserved for civilizations with thousands of years of diplomatic experience. Her ability to find common ground between radically different species proved invaluable in resolving conflicts that had seemed impossible to settle. The change in status brought new challenges. Other species began expecting humans to solve every difficult problem they encountered. The pressure was enormous, and the human delegation struggled with the responsibility of representing their entire species in matters of galactic importance. Jake Morrison was promoted to senior captain and given command of a joint exploration mission involving 6 different species. The mission was designed to test human leadership abilities in a mixed-species environment. Success would demonstrate that humans could not only adapt to galactic civilization but help lead. The mission took the joint crew to unexplored regions of space where they encountered phenomena that challenged every species' understanding of physics. Time moved differently in some areas, matter existed in impossible states in others, and life forms existed that defied every known category of biological organization. The human approach of embracing uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it proved essential to the mission's success. While other species became paralyzed when their instruments failed to provide clear readings, humans continued to function effectively by relying on observation, intuition, and collaborative problem-solving. The success of the mixed species mission established humanity as a bridge between different forms of intelligence and consciousness. Their gift was not superiority over other species, but rather the ability to find ways for different types of minds to work together effectively. Dr. Wells founded the Institute for Psychological Diversity, the first organization dedicated to studying and appreciating different approaches to intelligence and consciousness throughout the galaxy. Her work revealed that while humans were unique in their adaptability, every species possessed qualities that could benefit the galactic community when properly understood and applied. The transformation of humanity's status was remarkable, but not without cost. The pressure of representing their species and meeting galactic expectations weighed heavily on every member of the delegation. They had gone from being dismissed as unremarkable to being expected to solve problems that had stumped civilizations millions of years older than their own. 8 months after humanity's arrival at the assembly station, deep space monitoring stations detected something that sent waves of terror through the galactic community. The signals were unmistakable to those old enough to remember the ancient warnings passed down through generations of civilizations. The Devourers were returning. Emergency Council Director Artemis, a being of pure energy from the Stellar Confederation, called an immediate assembly of all galactic representatives. The massive hall filled with beings from thousands of worlds, but unlike previous gatherings, this one was dominated by fear. Species that had never shown emotion before displayed obvious signs of distress. The Devourers were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They existed as a collective consciousness that consumed entire civilizations, absorbing their knowledge, technology, and capabilities before moving on to the next target. They did not negotiate, take prisoners, or show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path. Director Artemis presented the terrifying facts to the assembled delegates. The Devourer fleet numbered in the millions of ships, each one built from the remains of countless consumed civilizations. They moved with perfect coordination because they shared a single mind spread across their entire force. Worst of all, they learned from every encounter and adapted their strategies to counter any resistance they faced. The last time the Devourers had threatened the galaxy, it had taken the combined forces of every known civilization and centuries of warfare to drive them back. Even then, victory had come at a terrible cost. Hundreds of species had been completely wiped out, and entire regions of space remained empty to this day. General Kronos of the Altarian Defense Forces presented battle simulations that painted a grim picture of their chances. The Devourers had learned from their previous defeat and would not make the same mistakes again. Conventional military tactics showed less than a 15% chance of success even with every galactic civilization united. The Crystalline Collective's Warmind, a specialized form of their species designed purely for military analysis, reached similar conclusions through different calculations. The mathematics of the situation were clear. The galaxy's combined forces were insufficient to stop the returning threat using traditional approaches. The Nexus Empire's tactical computers processed millions of battle scenarios and found only defeat in each one. Their mechanical logic concluded that the Devourer's ability to adapt and learn made conventional warfare not just difficult, but ultimately futile. Every strategy that had worked in the past would fail when used again. As the presentations continued, despair settled over the assembly like a thick fog. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were in agreement. They could not win this war using methods they understood. Yet no one could suggest an alternative approach that offered better chances of survival. It was during this moment of galactic despair that Colonel Danny Wright stood up from the human delegation section. The career military officer had been studying the Devourer data with the same intensity that had served him through decades of Earth's conflicts. What he saw gave him an idea that seemed impossible to everyone else. Wright requested permission to address the War Council, an honor typically reserved for species with proven military records spanning millennia. The request was so unusual that Director Artemis granted it more from curiosity than expectation. No one expected meaningful insight from a species whose entire military history covered only a few thousand years. Walking to the center of the vast hall, Wright faced beings whose civilizations had fought wars across galactic distances, while humanity was still discovering fire. Yet his voice carried confidence as he presented an analysis that challenged every assumption the galaxy held about warfare. Every species that has fought the Devourers has used their greatest strengths, Wright explained to the assembled military leaders. The Altarians used speed and precision. The Nexus Empire deployed overwhelming firepower. The Crystallines wielded energy manipulation. Each time the Devourers learned from the encounter and became stronger. The observation was accurate but seemed to lead nowhere useful. Of course, civilizations used their greatest strengths in warfare. The alternative was deliberately fighting at a disadvantage, which made no logical sense to anyone in the assembly. Wright continued with a proposal that seemed to border on madness. Instead of using humanity's strengths, whatever those might be, they would deliberately appear weak and chaotic. They would feed the Devourers false information about galactic capabilities and allow the enemy to adapt to counter these false weaknesses. The plan required something that no other galactic civilization possessed: the ability to act unpredictably while maintaining underlying coordination. Most species achieved success through careful planning and logical execution. Wright proposed succeeding through controlled chaos and deliberate confusion. Dr. Maya Rodriguez, a game theorist who had joined the human delegation as a civilian advisor, worked with alien mathematicians to develop what she called adaptive chaos theory. The concept involved creating strategies that changed based on real-time observations of enemy behavior, requiring commanders to make decisions that could not be predicted by logical analysis. The mathematics behind the theory challenged fundamental assumptions about how intelligent beings made decisions. Most galactic species assumed that optimal strategies could be calculated in advance and then executed according to plan. Humans proposed that the optimal strategy might be to have no fixed strategy at all. The War Council struggled to understand how deliberate unpredictability could be more effective than careful planning. The Altarian generals calculated that random actions would reduce military efficiency by over 60%. The Nexus Empire's computers could not process strategies that had no predetermined outcomes, yet the human analysis revealed a critical flaw in how the galaxy understood the Devourers. The enemy's greatest strength was their ability to adapt to logical opposition. They excelled at countering strategies that followed predictable patterns. But adaptation required understanding the underlying logic of enemy actions. What if there was no underlying logic to understand? What if human forces appeared to act randomly while actually following patterns that could not be predicted because they were based on intuition rather than calculation? The Devourers might adapt to counter logical human responses, only to discover that humans were not actually responding logically. The plan seemed to rely more on hope than military science, but conventional approaches offered little chance of survival. After days of debate, the galactic leaders reluctantly agreed to let humanity coordinate the defense effort. The decision was born of desperation rather than confidence. Wright began organizing the largest military mobilization in galactic history, but unlike any previous campaign, this one was designed to embrace uncertainty rather than eliminate it. Ships from dozens of civilizations were retrofitted with human-designed systems that could be reconfigured during battle. Communications networks were established that could function even when traditional command structures broke down. Training. Exercises confused and frustrated alien crews, who were accustomed to clear orders and predetermined tactics. Humans taught them to respond to situations based on immediate circumstances, rather than following established procedures. The concept of improvising solutions during combat was foreign to most galactic species. Jake Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and placed in command of the defense fleet. The responsibility was overwhelming, but he understood that this battle would determine not just humanity's place in the galaxy, but whether the galaxy itself would continue to exist. The preparations took months, with human advisors working around the clock to teach alien crews how to think and fight like humans. The cultural exchange was unprecedented, as species that had perfected their approaches over millions of years learned to embrace the uncertainty and chaos that humans had always lived. As the Devourer fleet approached the carefully chosen battleground, the galaxy's defenders prepared for a type of warfare that had never been attempted before. Success would require every species to abandon their greatest strengths and trust in humanity's greatest weakness, their inability to follow a plan exactly as written. The emergency alarm echoed through the galactic assembly station like the cry of a dying star. Jake Morrison was reviewing supply reports when the sound made him jump from his chair. Emergency alarms were rare on the station, and when they sounded, it usually meant something terrible had happened somewhere in the galaxy. Lisa Carter rushed to the main assembly hall, along with thousands of other representatives. The massive chamber buzzed with worried voices as species from across the galaxy tried to understand what was happening. The translation devices worked overtime, converting panic and concern into hundreds of different languages. Council Director Morpheus, a being made of living metal from the core worlds, appeared at the center of the hall. His metallic voice carried clearly through the chamber as he explained the situation. The Void Hunters, a violent species known for attacking anyone who crossed their path, had struck a research facility in the Andromeda sector. The attacked facility housed scientists from 12 different species who were working on new defensive technologies. These researchers had been developing weapons and shields that could protect peaceful civilizations from raiders and pirates. Now they were trapped, and their work might fall into the wrong hands. The problem was location. The research facility sat in one of the most dangerous regions of space known to exist. Gravitational anomalies pulled ships off course and tore apart anything that got too close. Radiation storms could kill entire crews within minutes. Even the most advanced vessels in the galaxy struggled to navigate the area safely. Director Morpheus called for volunteers, but the response was disappointing. The Altarians had fast ships that could reach the facility quickly, but their vessels lacked the heavy shielding needed to survive the radiation. Their crews would be dead before they could complete the rescue. The Crystalline Collective offered their energy manipulation abilities, which could help with the radiation problem. However, their crystal-based ships were too fragile to handle the gravitational stress. The intense forces would shatter their vessels like glass. The Nexus Empire had the most durable ships in the galaxy. Their mechanical vessels could survive almost any punishment, but they were also the slowest. By the time they reached the research facility, the survivors would have run out of air and supplies. Other species offered various forms of assistance, but each had limitations that made the mission impossible. The ethereal conclave could survive the journey, but their energy-based forms could not physically rescue solid beings. The Gas Giant Federation had ships that could handle the gravitational forces, but they moved too slowly through normal space. The discussion continued for over an hour with no solution in sight. The greatest minds in the galaxy were stumped by a problem that seemed to have no answer. Time was running out for the trapped scientists, and every minute of delay meant less chance of finding them alive. Lisa Carter stood up from her seat in the observer section. The action drew surprised looks from nearby aliens who had forgotten the humans were even present. She walked toward the center of the hall, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "Humanity volunteers for this rescue mission," she announced clearly. The response was immediate and not encouraging. Laughter came from several sections of the hall. The mechanical delegates of the Nexus Empire calculated the probability of human success at less than 1%. The Crystalline Collective noted that human ships were even more fragile than their own. Elder Zephyros spoke with the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. He reminded Lisa that this mission required capabilities that humans simply did not possess. Their ships were slow, their shielding was weak, and their technology was primitive compared to galactic standards. Jake Morrison had been studying the mission parameters on his datapad during the discussion. Human ships were indeed inferior to most galactic technology, but they had been designed with one important feature: they could be modified quickly. Earth's vessels were built to be adaptable because humans never knew what they might encounter in space. "Give us 72 hours, Morrison requested as he joined Lisa at the center of the hall. "If we cannot prove our capability within that time, we will withdraw our offer and accept that we were wrong." Director Morpheus considered the request. The situation was desperate enough that any attempt was worth considering, even from a species with primitive technology. He agreed to give humanity their chance, though few in the assembly expected them to succeed. The next 72 hours became the most intense period in human space exploration history. Chief Engineer Pete Collins worked without sleep, tearing apart non-essential systems throughout the UES horizon. Every piece of equipment that could be spared was converted into additional shielding or backup power supplies. Navigator Helen Price calculated and recalculated their flight path dozens of times. Instead of fighting against the gravitational anomalies, she planned to use them like a slingshot. The dangerous forces that destroyed other ships could actually speed up their journey if approached correctly. Medical Officer Dr. Kate Fisher prepared for the worst. She studied alien biology using the station's databases and improvised medical techniques that combined human knowledge with alien technology. Her makeshift medical bay looked nothing like standard procedure, but it might be their only chance to save lives. The modifications to their ship were dramatic. The UES Horizon barely looked like the same vessel that had brought them to the station. Extra armor plating covered every surface. Backup systems were installed in places that had never been designed to hold equipment. The interior was cramped and uncomfortable, but it might be able to survive what they were about to attempt. Other species watched the human preparations with curiosity and doubt. The modifications looked crude and desperate compared to the elegant solutions typically used by advanced civilizations. Many aliens privately thought the humans were about to commit suicide in a spectacular fashion. When the 72 hours were up, the modified UES Horizon launched from the station. Jake Morrison commanded the ship while Lisa Carter coordinated with the rescue teams. The entire human delegation had volunteered for the mission, knowing that failure would likely mean death for all of them. The journey to the Andromeda sector pushed both ship and crew beyond their limits. The first gravitational anomaly nearly tore them apart, but Helen's calculations held true. Instead of being destroyed, they were flung forward at incredible speed toward their destination. The radiation storms came next. Normal shielding would have failed within minutes, but the improvised defenses held. Pete's modifications were ugly and inefficient, but they worked. The crew received heavy radiation doses, but they survived long enough to continue the mission. When conventional navigation failed in the worst part of the anomaly field, the human crew did something that amazed the galaxy. They navigated by instinct. Using their knowledge of physics and their ability to recognize patterns, they guided their ship through areas where even the most advanced instruments could not function. The research facility appeared on their sensors like a miracle. The structure was badly damaged but still intact. 47 scientists from 12 different species were trapped inside, running low on air and power. The rescue had to be completed quickly or everyone would die. Loading the survivors onto the UES Horizon was difficult and dangerous. The ship was already overcrowded with its own crew, and adding 47 more beings pushed their life support systems to the breaking point. But humans had experience with overcrowding and emergency conditions that most galactic species lacked. The return journey was even more perilous than the trip out. The additional weight and the ship's damaged systems made every moment a struggle for survival. But the human crew refused to give up, improvising solutions to problems as they appeared and supporting each other through the worst moments. When the UES Horizon limped back into the assembly station's docking bay, it carried more than just rescued scientists. It carried proof that humanity possessed something the galaxy had not recognized, the ability to succeed when success seemed impossible. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched the massive ring structure grow larger on the main screen. The Galactic Assembly Station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched across space like a giant wheel, housing thousands of different alien species from across the galaxy. Today was the day that would change everything for humanity. Ambassador Lisa Carter checked her speech notes one more time. She had practiced these words for months, knowing that this moment would decide Earth's future among the stars. The blue dress uniform felt heavy on her shoulders, but not as heavy as the responsibility she carried for her entire species. The Altarian escort ship guided them toward the docking bay. Commander Veltar, their alien guide, had been polite but distant during the journey. His gray skin and large black eyes showed no emotion as he watched the human delegation prepare for their arrival. He had seen hundreds of new species arrive at the station over the years, and most of them were quickly forgotten. The docking process took 3 hours. Human technology was slow compared to the advanced systems used throughout the galaxy. The other ships in the bay moved with smooth precision, while the UES Horizon bumped and jerked its way to the assigned platform. Several alien observers watched the clumsy landing with what looked like amusement. Lisa stepped off the ship with her team of 20 humans. Dr. Allen Brooks carried samples of Earth's greatest achievements in science and art. General Carol Price wore her dress uniform with pride, representing humanity's military traditions. Behind them came engineers, diplomats, and scientists, all chosen to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish. The station's corridors were filled with beings that looked like living crystals, others made of metal and wire, and creatures that seemed to be made of pure energy. The humans drew curious looks as they walked toward the main assembly hall. Most aliens had seen carbon-based lifeforms before, but Earth's representatives were still a novelty. Commander Veltar led them through endless hallways. The walls showed images of great galactic achievements, massive space stations, planets moved from one star system to another, and technologies that could reshape matter at will. Compared to these wonders, Earth's accomplishments seemed very small. The main assembly hall was enormous. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central speaking area. Representatives from every known civilization in the galaxy had gathered to meet the newest species to request membership. The noise of hundreds of different languages being translated filled the air. Elder Zephyros of the Ethereal Conclave called the session to order. His ancient voice carried the weight of 10 million years of existence. The Ethereal Conclave was the oldest civilization in the galaxy, and their opinion carried great influence with all the other species. Lisa walked to the center of the hall. The translator device in her ear converted her words into thousands of different languages As she began to speak, she told them about Earth, about humanity's journey from caves to spaceflight in just a few thousand years. She spoke about human art, music, literature, and the dream of joining the galactic community. The audience listened politely but without much interest. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being that looked like living diamond, noted that human creativity was just normal biological behavior. They had seen the same patterns in dozens of other species. The Nexus Empire's mechanical delegate calculated that human technology was 4,000 years behind minimum galactic standards. Their computers and spaceships were primitive by galactic measures. Even their fastest ships would take centuries to travel distances that other species covered in days. Dr. Brooks presented human scientific achievements, but the reaction was disappointing. The discovery of DNA seemed basic to species that could manipulate genes at will. Nuclear energy was considered ancient technology. Even humanity's greatest mathematical theories were known to civilizations that had solved those problems millions of years ago. The cultural presentation was no better. Human music was compared to the singing of simple animals. Their art was called crude compared to species that could paint with light itself. Even human literature, with all its depth and emotion, was dismissed as typical storytelling found in most intelligent species. Elder Zephyros spoke for the evaluation committee after 3 hours of presentations. His words hit the human delegation like cold water. Humanity showed no unique qualities that would benefit the galactic community. They were functionally identical to 73% of carbon-based species already encountered. Their technology was primitive, their lifespan was short, and their civilization was too young to contribute anything meaningful. The preliminary ruling was harsh, but final. Humanity would be granted observer status only. They could stay at the station and learn from other civilizations, but full membership was postponed indefinitely. There was no timeline given for when this decision might be reviewed. The humans were assigned quarters in the outer ring of the station. These rooms were typically given to species of minimal importance or those waiting for basic administrative processing. The message was clear. Earth's children were welcome to watch, but not to participate. That night, Lisa sat in her small room and composed a message to Earth. She tried to find positive words to describe their reception, but the truth was impossible to hide. Humanity had traveled to the stars full of hope and pride, only to discover they were nothing special. Dr. Brooks worked late into the night, analyzing the data they had been given access to. The galaxy was vast beyond human imagination. Species existed that could manipulate time itself, others that lived as pure thought, and civilizations that had built artificial universes. Against such wonders, humanity seemed painfully ordinary. News of their lukewarm reception reached Earth within days. Protests erupted in major cities around the world. People had spent decades preparing for this moment, building ships and training ambassadors, all based on the dream that humanity had something special to offer the galaxy. Now they were being told they were just another unremarkable species among thousands. The mood on the station grew heavy among the human delegation. They had expected challenges but not complete dismissal. Some talked about returning to Earth immediately, but Lisa convinced them to stay. They had come this far, and giving up now would only confirm what the aliens already believed about humanity. Commander Veltar visited the human quarters on their third day. He explained that this reaction was normal for new species. Most civilizations went through a period of adjustment when they realized how vast and advanced the galaxy really was. He suggested that humans focus on learning rather than trying to impress anyone. The suggestion felt like another insult, but Lisa realized it might be their only option. If humanity was going to find their place among the stars, they would need to prove themselves through actions rather than words. The question was, how could they show the galaxy something unique when everything they had already seemed so ordinary? The Battle of the Spiral Nebula became the moment that revealed humanity's true place in the galaxy. Admiral Kelly Barnes stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching as the Devourer fleet approached through the swirling cosmic dust. 300 human ships led a coalition of over 10,000 vessels from 47 different civilizations in the largest military engagement in galactic history. The UES Liberty had been specifically designed for this battle. Unlike the sleek and efficient vessels preferred by other species, human ships were built to be modular and adaptable. Every system could be reconfigured during combat, and the crew was trained to rebuild their own ship while fighting for their lives. The initial phase of the battle went exactly as Wright had planned. Human forces appeared to be using conventional tactics copied from other galactic civilizations. They formed neat battle lines, fired their weapons in coordinated volleys, and maneuvered according to standard military doctrine. To outside observers, they looked like any other inexperienced species trying their best against impossible odds. The Devourers responded predictably. Their collective consciousness analyzed the human tactics and began adapting their strategies to counter what they perceived as the galaxy's strongest remaining defense. They had fought similar battles countless times before and knew exactly how to defeat organized military resistance. But this was exactly what humanity wanted. As the Devourers adjusted their approach to counter expected human responses, Captain Megan Foster executed the first phase of the real plan. Human ships throughout the fleet began displaying behavior that seemed random and desperate to the Devourers' analytical minds. What the Devourers could not understand was that the apparent chaos was actually a sophisticated form of coordination. Human crews had been trained to respond to subtle cues and environmental changes in ways that appeared unpredictable, but actually followed complex patterns based on intuition rather than logic. Lieutenant Commander Roy Clark led a squadron that seemed to be fleeing in panic from the advancing enemy forces. His ships moved in ways that appeared wasteful and inefficient, burning fuel unnecessarily and exposing themselves to enemy fire. But each maneuver was part of a larger pattern designed to draw a portion of the Devourer fleet into a carefully prepared trap. The Devourers fell for the deception because it matched their understanding of how inferior species behaved under pressure. They had seen countless civilizations break apart and flee when faced with overwhelming odds. The human response seemed to fit the same pattern, so they adapted their tactics to exploit what they perceived as panic and confusion. Dr. Stephen Cooper monitored the battle from the command center, watching as thousands of years of Devourer tactical experience led them into humanity's trap. The enemy had spent millennia learning to counter logical military responses, making them extremely vulnerable to the intuitive and emotional decisions that humans actually relied upon in crisis situations. The turning point came when Admiral Barnes gave the signal for the real battle to begin. Throughout the fleet, human commanders made decisions based on instinct, creativity, and hope rather than tactical analysis. They took risks that seemed foolish, made sacrifices that appeared illogical, and coordinated their efforts through methods that the Devourer collective consciousness could not comprehend. Captain Foster's squadron, which had appeared to be retreating in disorder, suddenly turned and struck at the Devourer formation from an unexpected angle. Her ships had been using their apparent flight to position themselves for an attack that no logical analysis could have predicted. The enemy had adapted to counter-retreat, not a disguised assault. Lieutenant Clark's forces, meanwhile, had been using their seemingly panicked maneuvers to herd a large portion of the enemy fleet into a region of space where the nebula's magnetic fields would interfere with Devourer communications. When the trap was sprung, those enemy ships found themselves cut off from their collective consciousness and unable to coordinate their response. The results were devastating to the Devourer fleet. Their adaptive algorithms, designed to counter logical opposition, could not process the combination of apparent randomness and underlying purpose that characterized human warfare. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that became stronger through unpredictability rather than weaker. As the battle raged, other galactic civilizations began to understand what they were witnessing. The Altarian crews learned to abandon their precise formations and fight with the fluid adaptability that humans had taught them. The Nexus Empire's mechanical ships began improvising tactics that their computers had never calculated. Even the ancient crystallines found themselves using their energy manipulation in creative ways that defied their traditional approaches. The Devourer collective consciousness struggled to adapt to an enemy that seemed to change its fundamental nature from moment to moment. Every time they thought they understood human tactics, the patterns shifted in ways that revealed new aspects of the same underlying approach. It was like trying to defeat an opponent who was simultaneously following rules and breaking them. Admiral Barnes coordinated the fleet through what could only be described as organized chaos. Orders were given and immediately modified based on changing circumstances. Ships were regrouped and reassigned based on opportunities that appeared and disappeared within minutes. The entire battle plan evolved continuously as the engagement progressed. The breakthrough came when the Devourers attempted to use their ultimate weapon, complete tactical adaptation. They analyzed every human action and developed what their collective intelligence calculated to be the perfect counter-strategy. But their calculations were based on the assumption that humans followed logical decision-making processes similar to other species. When the Devourers deployed their perfect counter-strategy, they discovered that human decisions were not based on logic alone. Fear, hope, loyalty, and intuition all played roles in human tactical thinking. The enemy had adapted to counter rational human responses, making themselves vulnerable to the emotional and instinctive reactions that actually drove human behavior in combat. The final phase of the battle saw something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The Devourer fleet, faced with an opponent that defied their understanding of how intelligent species behaved, began to retreat. Their collective consciousness, which had consumed countless civilizations over millions of years, could not process beings who succeeded by refusing to be predictable. Captain Foster led the pursuit as the enemy fleet withdrew toward the edge of known space. Her ships harried the retreating Devourers while being careful not to push them into a desperate last stand. The goal was to drive them away, not to provoke them into a final destructive gambit that might cost both sides everything. The Battle of the Spiral Nebula ended with the Devourer fleet disappearing into the void between galaxies, retreating for the first time in recorded history. They left behind damaged ships and scattered debris, but more importantly, they left behind the knowledge that they could be defeated by species they did not understand. In the aftermath of victory, Elder Zephyros addressed the Galactic Assembly with words that would be remembered for millennia. We sought to measure humanity by our own standards and found them wanting. But humanity's gift to the galaxy is not that they excel within existing parameters, but that they refuse to be bound by parameters at all. Lisa Carter, now representing a species that had proven their worth beyond any doubt, stood before the assembled delegates as humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Assembly. But more than that, they were invited to help lead the galaxy into a new era of exploration and growth that embraced uncertainty rather than feared it. The human delegation established the Department of Adaptive Solutions, a new branch of galactic government dedicated to approaching problems that traditional methods could not solve. Jake Morrison became the first human admiral in the Galactic Defense Force, tasked with developing strategies that worked with uncertainty rather than against it. Dr. Wells founded the Institute for Psychological Diversity, working with species throughout the galaxy to understand and appreciate different approaches to intelligence and problem-solving. Her research showed that while humans were unique in their adaptability, every species had qualities that could benefit the galactic community when properly understood. Earth became a center of learning and innovation where young beings from across the galaxy came to study human methods of adaptation and creative problem-solving. The species that had once been dismissed as unremarkable became the catalyst for a new golden age of galactic civilization that valued growth and change over perfection and stability. In the end, humanity's true nature was revealed to be something the galaxy desperately needed without knowing it: the ability to grow, change, and adapt without losing the essential qualities that made them who they were. They showed the galaxy that strength came not from perfection, but from the willingness to evolve and embrace the unknown with hope rather than fear.